Can I get roll call, please?
Chairperson Kimbrough.
Here.
Vice Chair Stedfield.
Here.
Member Bagwell. Here. Member Bonkowski.
Here.
Member Erb. Member Hastings.
Here.
Member McQuarrie. No? Ex officio member Rosenberg.
Here.
A quorum's present.
Okay, so I'll read that when I get right before public comment, I guess. So agenda management notes, anything taken out of order today?
No, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. Any disclosures for the meeting today? Seeing nobody raise their hand or say anything? All right, no disclosures today. So I'm going to read this paragraph. Although CAMPO often provides an opportunity for additional public comment during each specific item designated for possible action on the agenda, public comment will be temporarily limited to the beginning of the agenda before any action is taken, and again at the end before adjournment. This policy will remain effective during the period of time the state of Nevada is under the state of emergency as declared by the governor due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and is intended to achieve the efficient conduct of meetings while facilitating public participation via conference and telephonic means. So our first item on the agenda will be public comment. So can you introduce yourself, I guess, or you're going to finish off the introduction, huh?
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Dirk Goring for the record. We have a gentleman here named Joe Smidlin. He is a member of our construction team. He's helping us introduce fiber into our pavement mix. And we thought this would be a good opportunity for him to share some of the benefits of those fibers in pavement. So Joe Smidlin is with Florida Fiber, and he was just going to give you a small presentation.
Thank you, Dirk. Pleasure to be here. Again, my name is Joe with Pacific Geosource is the name of our company. We're a specialty pavement consulting firm, and we help cities and counties, all owners, build longer lasting roads. I can move it closer. Build longer lasting roads using innovative pavement reinforcement technologies. So I was invited to speak here by Carson City staff about a project that was completed this morning on Solomon Road. It used fiber reinforced asphalt. It was the first of its kind in northern Nevada. High tensile fibers were introduced at the asphalt plant into the mix with the goal of increasing the strength and durability of the mix. It was placed in a mill and fill over a problem area that experienced frequent rutting and cracking. So this is, again, the first project of its kind in northern Nevada. The benefit to the owner, this technology, is a pavement that lasts 50% longer or more, which could mean 4 to 6 years in a typical overlay. Life cycle costs or savings can be 30 to 40% over the life of the pavement. And the goal of the approach of using fiber reinforced asphalt, which can really be applied in any paving application, so it could be maintenance, mill and fill, it could be reconstructs. The goal is to build a longer lasting roadway that's going to require less maintenance spend in the future, and ultimately help cities, help owners catch up on maintenance backlogs, increase pavement quality throughout the region, and then reduce taxpayer spend, save taxpayer dollars in the end on pavement construction.
Any questions?
Happy to take any questions. Yeah.
Can you go over again for me on the front end then of a project, what is the increased cost?
So a typical increased cost on the front end is maybe 10 to 15%
To get
in
a
the material
50%
in the material cost of the asphalt. Project wise, probably more like 3 to 5% when you consider all the costs that go into a paving project.
Wow. And yet, if I heard right, but extend the useful life by 50%.
That's correct. That's the data that has been demonstrated in the field.
Wow. And how many projects can I say? Is this something you've done on hundreds of other projects? What's the
On the order of
data?
thousands.
Thousands.
Yeah. Nationwide. Yeah.
I'm very interested in the data. If you can share at some point with us, that would be
Absolutely.
wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Sorry. One comment to add is that a lot of times in the past, fiber was an option to kind of do a similar type of a treatment and to help stop the reflection of cracks. But the fiber will function as the fiber will function as the layer, the fabric layer. But the benefit of using the fiber is that it's really easy to use and it's part of the current operation structure in the system to put down the pavement anyways. So you're not adding too many additional steps. And you can do it with all the existing equipment for patching or mill and overlay or reconstructions.
This project was it one lane, about 50 yards long? I saw that today.
Yeah, it was probably 1 to 200 yards long, one lane.
So, go ahead, Lori, and then I'll ask mine.
So then my question is, you said it doesn't require any specialized equipment. Is it something then that's just like an added mix into the process? Because when I went by, I actually happened to go by it myself today. And it definitely had, to me, a stronger smell to the process, but is that just a 1 hour? How long for the curing is kind of what I'm getting to.
There wouldn't be any change to smell, or there's really no visible difference other than being able to see some individual fibers in the mix before it's placed and compacted, but no harmful environmental effects. Like you were correct in saying that it's an additive, so it's actually introduced at the asphalt plant. When the mix arrives at the job site, it's treated, placed, and compacted just like conventional asphalt mix.
That actually was my question, how you go to the asphalt plant. So do you put it there and so you can use any asphalt plant and do exactly what you need to do, or do they mix it when they deliver it, or do you get it to the plant?
It's introduced actually at the plant as a part of the mixing process. You've got rock, you've got the oil, and then you've got the fibers. So they're all introduced into the drum, and it's integrated into the plant mix process with no changes and no major alterations to the plant. So it's very easy for implementation.
So a lot of times when you put down new pavement, about a few years later, you want to seal it. Do you have to seal yours too, like normal pavement management plan?
Yes,
Which
the goal
that
there
5
is
years
to,
counts that too, right?
yes, the goal there is to seal in the hydrocarbons and avoid try to prevent the oil from, escaping. And obviously you guys have some sun here, environmental conditions, and you want to continue with those typical maintenance practices.
So, and I may be using the wrong terms, but when you do these paving jobs, you put the paving down, and you come in with the top grade. Are you guys the top grade, or are you the actual pavement that you put down? I might use the wrong term there, but.
You're probably talking about surfacing treatments like slurries or microsurfacing.
Well, when they put in the asphalt, then they come in with just that little layer to cover over the final pavement. So I didn't know if that's the.
Talking about the wearing course.
Yeah,
There
well,
you
so
go.
the fiber reinforced, fibers can be introduced into the base course or the wearing course of the asphalt, either one. So often if it's a full reconstruct, it'll be introduced into both, so you can gain the benefits of enhanced traffic carrying capacity and also reduced cracking in the surface.
Well, I guess I need to say thank you, somebody. So thank you for that.
My pleasure, yeah.
And I guess we'll keep an eye on it for you.
Yeah, and I'm happy to provide as many examples of how other agencies, cities, and counties throughout the western United States are currently using this technology and the kind of value they're getting from it.
Well, the big question from my right-hand side here earlier was winter conditions versus all summer. So if you've been in Montana or Wyoming or some of those states to test that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's freeze-thaw environments is one of the places where fiber-reinforced asphalt can add the most benefit.
Wow. Well, that was all good information. Is there any other questions?
Staff have the digital pamphlets from Joe, and we'll distribute them to the CAMPO board subsequent to the meeting.
Thank you.
Yeah, I am.
I have one question and one comment. One is, what is the fiber? Is it fiberglass or is it Kevlar? Or what is it?
Very
We
good
brought
question. It's a blend of polymer fibers and Kevlar. The generic term for Kevlar is aramid. And I did bring some samples of the fiber if you guys would like to check it out.
And the comment is this is only to be used in a hot mix. In other words, cut back, you can't use it because you don't really have a decent binder.
Correct. It can be used in hot mix and warm mix, and we have another fiber blend that's designed for use in cold mixes and 100% wrap paving, which we're hoping is a wave of the future to make all of our paving sustainable.
All right, I think we're done with the questions now. All right, so thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank
And
you
it's
for the opportunity.
Beginning of the meeting, so if there is any other public comment come in,
We do have public comment, Mr. Chair. Scott Kula would like to make a comment.
Are you able to hear me?
yeah, Scott, are you talking about up Kings Canyon? That's because that's the agenda for
I'm sorry, hang on.
RTC instead of this group.
Okay, see that again, please?
If you're talking, are you going to talk about Kings Canyon?
I am.
You're on the wrong meeting. Campo doesn't have it on their agenda, RTC does, and Campo adjourns here when we're a short-lived meeting, maybe a half hour, and then we adjourn and go to RTC. And then that's when we would need your comment.
All right, I'll come back in then. Thank you very much.
You bet, thank you.
Okay.
Any other public comment?
Yes, Mr. Chair, it looks like we have two callers. Give me 1 minute. Caller, it's your turn for public comment. Please state your name for the record.
Hello?
Hello, this is Chaz is finally here.
Hello, Chaz, I saw your picture come on the screen, it scared me.
You're not the first one to say that, Mark.
So, do we have public comment on the air that I can't hear?
There is no more public comment, Mr. Chair.
Oh, great, thank you. All right, well, then we'll move on to, where am I at? Approval of the minutes. So can I have a motion or any changes for the minutes for our last meeting?
I move to approve the minutes for the Carson Area Metropolitan Planning Organization for May 13th, 2020 as presented.
Second? Any discussion? Seeing none, call for the question. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? None? Unanimous? Okay, now we're on our public meeting for possible action, presentation, discussion on financial assumptions and projections for Campo's 30-year regional transportation plan. I figured out I'll be 100 years old that day. That's pretty old. Dirk?
Thank you, Chair. I look forward to seeing you then. So this item presents the financial assumptions for Campo's 30-year regional transportation plan. Federal regulations require a regional transportation plan to demonstrate how the plan, which includes projects and programs, will be fiscally implemented. For the purposes of consistency, Campo, NDOT, and the three other MPOs have developed the following financial assumptions for future revenues and expenditures. Revenue projections assume a conservative 2% annual growth rate. Expenditures used a 5-year rolling average of the Producer Price Index to develop a 3% inflation rate for projects and programs when implemented in the later years of the plan. With revenue growing at a slower rate than inflation, funding available for projects and programs are slowly reducing over time. To identify and to predict future revenue assumptions, assumptions were made based on funds attributed to the region over the past 4 years, including existing agreements such as STBG, with NDOT. Campo staff has consulted with member agencies regarding available revenue. The table in the report identifies federal, state, and local funding sources. Additionally, the table in the report shows funding used by both NDOT and Campo member agencies within the Campo area, such as the National Highway Performance Funds and Highway Safety Improvement Funds. Those are funds used by NDOT within Campo. Annual estimates are projected for a total of 30 years, as well as 2 bucket years to match Campo's travel demand model. First bucket year is 2021 to 2030, which is a 10-year bucket. And then there's a 2031 to a 2050, and that's a 20-year bucket. With a total amount of funding, while a total amount of funding may look like it's a lot, if we assume a conservative figure for reconstructing 1 mile of road at $1 million, it is easy to see the funding gap. For example, Carson City has about $93 million in local funding over 30 years, which would allow Carson City to reconstruct about 93 miles out of 281 miles of roadway. This means that Carson City could reconstruct 1/3 of its roadway every 30 years. The plan does not commit funds. Funds will be later programmed in Campo's Transportation Improvement Program and ultimately through future agreements and construction contracts. The next step will be to identify projects and programs from the member agencies as well as NDOT. Staff is planning an event on June 29th in the afternoon to share projects, findings from the travel demand model, findings from the survey, exhibits on active transportation, and crash data. The meeting details are still being developed, and staff is planning to include a virtual presence as well as an in-person option. The location is planned for the Sierra Room at Carson City Community Center. So, in conclusion, staff is requesting comments on the accuracy of the revenue projections. And that concludes my comments, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Dirk, under RTC, the Carson City 1/8 cent sales tax lump sum will bond within 5 years. So that's a future bond, but we have an existing bond, and then there's surplus revenue that's generated above and beyond the 2 debt service payments. But I don't see that accounted for in here. Is that somewhere that I'm not seeing it?
I think if I understood it correctly, my assumptions were that there's about $18 million, about 6 currently designated for North Carson and 12 for William, which could change. But those were the only capital projects from a roadway standpoint that have been identified in the plan of expenditure. But you are correct that this would be part of the second bond. As for the other funding, I haven't placed it in here. I just wasn't sure if all that was committed to transportation at this time. Right.
Okay, that makes sense, because there are other items in the plan of expenditure
Yeah.
that they could be allocated to.
Correct. For example, we had the multi-use community
building.
center.
This building here,
Okay, yes, yeah.
right? Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Go ahead, Laurie.
And so does the $1.4 million that you have on the RTC motor vehicle fuel include the diesel tax for the $400,000 a year? Is that in that number?
We haven't included, since there's still a second reading, we haven't included it at this time. We can.
We had second
We
reading.
decided not to include it because it's uncertain whether the diesel tax will continue after 2022. And it didn't, because of that uncertainty, it doesn't make sense. Really, these are, there's a word for it, but it's predictable and reasonably assured funding into the future. And there's not necessarily the confidence at staff level that this will be voted on by the voters past 2022. So it was not included at this time. But we can go back and look at including those revenues for 2020 and 2021
The 2 years.
for 2 years.
Right.
Thank you.
There's 800,000
Yeah.
potentially for the 2 years.
It's a good comment.
Any other questions? I just have one. How fluid is this? How often are you going to have to update this as we go through these radical, enlightening front page stories of cuts in the future here? So is this something you got to do like immediately, or do you like once a year review it and then come back? And
But we typically update the regional transportation plan every 5 years. But we have to also remember that this is a 30-year document, so
Right.
you're cyclical, right? There's good times and there are bad times, and that's why we've used kind of historical data to help us make, revenue projections. And the 2% was also something we used in the last regional transportation plan, so there's some consistency there. But it's really, especially, kind of using the words of Commissioner Bronkowski about making sure that we have the data to support the changes in revenue right now. And so that's kind of why staff decided to just, be more conservative and not make changes based on what's happening currently.
A wise choice. Good job. Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, it's hard to sit and predict anything until you have data. So, yeah. All right, great. So I don't ask for comments, so actually we ask for any more comments or questions or a motion. How's that? Oh, it's informational only. I like those. Thank you. Well, it does say that, doesn't it? All right, well, 6B for possible action, but discussion and possible action to authorize the transportation manager to execute amendment number 1 to cooperative agreement number NM 111-16-804 with the Nevada Department of Transportation for a no-cost time extension. Lucia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Lucia Maloney, Transportation Manager. The cooperative agreement that we're discussing on this item was executed October 1 of 2016 and is set to expire September 30th of this year. This non-monetary agreement, what it really does is it sets forth general provisions for duties and responsibilities of CAMPO and NDOT as required by the Federal Highway Administration for metropolitan planning agencies. The proposed amendment is a no-cost extension through September 30th of 2022. All other provisions of the original agreement remain unchanged and in full force and effect. And staff recommends authorization for the transportation manager to execute as presented. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
Yeah, Mark, this is Chaz. I have a question. I was just curious. The original agreement was for 4 years. The extension is for 2 years. Is that, I'm just curious as to the reason that for the 2 years rather than 4.
That's a great question. Thank you, Chaz. Staff in discussing with NDOT, things change with population and transportation after the decennial census. And so, the census happens in 2020. Generally, we will expect to get the data end of 21 or 22, and things may change. And so that's why we took that approach. And likely we'll come back again with no substantive changes in 2022, but that was the rationale for the 2 years.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Comments? No, we bring it back for a motion.
I move to authorize the transportation manager to execute the amendment as presented.
What's the Tweety bird? That wasn't me. All right, so let me call for the question. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Carries unanimous. Item 6C for possible action, discussion and possible action regarding an authorization for the transportation manager to sign a planning cooperative agreement number P211-20-804 with the Nevada Department of Transportation for $40,000 in financial assistance to support updates to CAMPO's travel demand model and to develop the 2050 regional transportation plan. Lucia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you're aware, CAMPO staff are updating the CAMPO's travel demand model as well as developing the 2050 regional transportation plan. Staff did identify a funding shortfall for those efforts, and through discussion with NDOT, we identified a consistency with NDOT's 2020 State Planning and Research Program. NDOT staff has very graciously determined and identified the availability of $40,000 to support this funding gap. There is no local match required by this for this funding. Once executed, CAMPO will invoice NDOT for $20,000 upon completion of the draft RTP, and an additional $20,000 upon release of the final RTP for actual costs incurred. The CAMPO board approval this evening will allow staff to execute the agreement quickly and complete the RTP by fall of 2020 as required by the Federal Highway Administration. I appreciate any questions or discussion.
Any questions? This was an easier one. Huh? All right, so I'll bring it back for a motion.
I move to authorize the transportation manager to execute the agreement.
Have a
Second.
second, Rig. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. Item 6D, Discussion possible action regarding the interlocal cooperative agreement between CAMPO, the Carson City Regional Transportation Commission, and the Carson City Board of Supervisors. Again, Lucia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I received some late board member comment in advance of this meeting, so I'm kind of going to go off the cuff here on this. So bear with me and please correct me if I say something incorrectly. This interlocal agreement outlines the responsibilities of each of the respective agencies and organizations within it. And as it relates to transportation planning, street and highway projects, maintenance and provision of public transportation services, and other tasks necessary for implementation of our transportation program. The agreement was last amended in 2013. Today's proposed amendments update the agreement to clarify approval authority of each agency and organization. Before I open it up for discussion, it was suggested by a board member that the language in the Regional Transportation Commission agrees section, item number 3, that discusses award and execution of street and highway contracts. There's a clause in there that says, and also other funds, including but not limited to water and sewer funds, provided that those other funds were previously budgeted by the city. There is a suggestion to copy that clause, and in the city agrees section under number 2, where it says, in about the fifth line, execution of contracts, comma, and then we'll add, and also other funds, or contracts including other funds, including but not limited to water and sewer funds, provided that those other funds were previously budgeted by the city, such to then the city agrees to delegate that authority back to RTC. So it essentially just copies it over. Other than that, I did not receive any comments on this proposed amendment. I did not have an opportunity to discuss that late ask with our district attorney. He has a serious face on, so I'll let him know if he'll let me know if I say anything wrong, but otherwise I'm open for questions and discussion. Thank you.
Is there a face?
So, Todd, would you like a few moments to think about that before we move forward, or do you want some questions and discussion first?
This is Todd Reese, Deputy DA for the record. If you all have other questions or comments on that, please go ahead and discuss. I'll look at that particular piece right now.
Any questions?
Just comment. It just struck me. Do we ever have stormwater that's actually included in those other funds that we do joint projects? So it's water, sewer, and I just now came to me that occasionally we have a small component of stormwater. So I would also like to just say in both 3 and 2, so 3 under RTC and 2 under city, should we add stormwater? Probably just for the safe side, so.
In the future, there may certainly be stormwater funding.
Right, and so I'm just looking that both RTC could execute an agreement that has multiple funding sources, which is what I'm after here, and that the city also would delegate multiple funding sources so long as they're budgeted, the city. So it's a cross delegation is what I'm looking at here, that both parties can execute. And then I'm assuming that the only thing that's not in here is the hierarchy of which organization's going to get the agreement. But if it's mostly road, it would be at RTC and it might have minor utility aspects. But if it's mostly a utility project with a minor road component, then the Board of Supervisors would handle it. Is that what the discussion is here and the purpose of the agreement?
The language, though, states, and also other funds, including but not limited to water and sewer funds. So stormwater is already, or any other fund, would already be included if required.
Other funds, so we don't have to designate stormwater.
Right.
This is Todd Reese, Deputy DA for the record. Supervisor Bonkowski, I absolutely agree with you. The sewer and water, the specific mention of the sewer or water is called out and including. So technically, other funds generally encompasses,
anything else that would be a part of the project. I think that adding that delegation under section 2, I don't have any objection to that. For the city agrees, I don't have any objection to that. I think that would work well. Or a, delegation and acceptance of delegation. To be specific, if you'd like to call out stormwater in there, we can do that. On the decision about which project is a street and highway project versus which project is not, it's currently generally taken on a individual basis depending on what the project is. If the project is, first of all, if there's no street or highway component, clearly it's not a street or highway project. If there is a street or highway component, then we've been looking at what's the driver of the project? Is it the highways or is it the utilities? And also, what is the major source of funding for the project? What's the major piece of the project? Is it highways or utilities? And depending on how everything falls out, we've been bringing it to RTC or will bring it to RTC or the board, depending on how, whether it shakes out as a highway or highway project or a utility project.
Or in certain cases, you'd bring it to both, such as South Carson Street.
In certain cases, we would bring it, in certain cases involving major projects, we would at least advise both boards about it. If we execute, as it stands, the agreement essentially requires RTC to sign off on RTC funds. So that's one of the changes here, is that the RTC would be doing a reciprocal authorization to the board. Once that authorization is in place, it may be cleaner to have one approval and one, we'd still bring it to the board, but it might not be for approval. But certainly that is a consideration. If we're getting into a very large project, we want everybody to be advised of it.
Yeah, I would understand, like Carson Street, RTC is a good forum for public comment to bring forward to the Board of Supervisors. So, yeah, I like that process.
Mm-hmm.
One more piece in the chain for a chance for the public to make comment. Any other questions?
Yeah, Mark, this is Chaz.
Okay.
I have a question.
Go
Can you
ahead,
hear me?
Chaz. Go ahead.
Okay. I was just curious, under the city agrees number 9, it doesn't mention pandemics. Do they fall under acts of God?
This is Todd Reese. I believe you're referring to everybody agrees number 9, or all parties agree number 9. And yes, generally, I believe that pandemics and declarations of emergency would fall under the force majeure clause.
Oh, we do.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure they were covered somewhere.
Yes, I would call pandemic an act of God, yes.
Thank you.
Well, that was a heavy subject there for a second. So,
We could so debate, what if the pandemic is caused by release of a virus from a foreign agent?
Yeah.
Is that an act of God? I don't think it is.
oh my God, I'm staying out of that. We'll move forward on it. My only question was, is who put all the red in here? This, all of a sudden, which is really, it's funny that all parties agree was not part of this contract before. And so that means you're doing a better job of review and making sure that these things don't come apart on us. And every one of these things are the things that can come apart on you. because you don't have some rules in the game there. So
That's,
that was very good.
Mr. Chair, you're absolutely right. I'm just trying to make sure they're, in case something happens.
But nothing, yeah,
you
nothing
know,
always runs smoothly.
In case things don't run smoothly there, yes, I agree.
All right, yeah, well, I was impressed by all that, and it was certainly legalese discussion there. It was not Lucia's writing, I didn't think, in that spot, or Dirk, it was lawyer talk. All right, so any other questions or discussion? If not, we'll move it back for, for a motion.
Mr. Chair, if I may, before a motion, may I summarize what I heard
Yeah,
for the changes?
I forgot, I was gonna make sure she has the right, proper thing to write down
Okay.
for the
So,
motion.
under the Regional Transportation Commission agrees, where it says, including but not limited to water and sewer funds, we will add water, sewer, and stormwater funds. And under city agrees number 2, it will read, to hereby authorize the RTC to act on behalf of the city and supervisors in carrying out the full intent of the budget authority for street and highway projects and street maintenance projects by completing project design and right-of-way acquisition, either in-house through appointed staff or consultants, calling for bids, awarding of bids, execution of contracts, including those with other funds, including but not limited to water, sewer, and stormwater funds, provided that those other funds were previously budgeted by the city, and supervising all project activities, including right-of-way appraisal, acquisition, construction, including the resolution of condemnation and pursuit of eminent domain proceedings if necessary. Period.
Does that all make sense, Lori, for what you were hoping to put in place for the motion?
Do we, read me back the piece on number 2. Should we add and other funds to cover any minor? She had I think she didn't say and other funds, but remind me.
Supervisor Bagwell, I believe I heard other funds in there, but with your,
That's correct.
with your permission, if I could win whatever motion you make, if I could have a little bit of flexibility to craft the language as needed to correspond with the board's intent.
Totally agreeable. So are we ready for a motion now then? I think so.
I move to incorporate the transportation manager's comments into a motion.
Second, anybody?
With the authority for the district attorney's office to conform the language.
I agree.
So I got agreement on the motion.
And a second.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Second from Greg. Any other discussion? Hearing none, call for the question. All in favor, say aye.
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 What are you going to tell us, Dan?
Dan Stuckey, Deputy Public Works Director. So if I'm understanding it right on that, the number 2 on the city agrees, the city already has the authority to approve water utility funds, right? So should they have the authority to approve the street funds? Or is that?
The number 2 correction is to allow, the city is granting the RTC the authority. The city is delegating its authority for water, sewer,
Okay. That makes sense.
stormwater, and other funds if they were budgeted. The other one that the city can do, the RTC money, is under the other number, is 16.
16, okay.
Right, but we were missing the first half. RTC was taking it, but we needed to delegate it.
Okay, thank you. Sorry for interjecting.
Well, that's right. It was right when I was
just
making
wanted
the
to make sure we
motion.
get it
I
right.
thought, man.
That's okay, I had a little chart out earlier going, okay, this one can give it to this one, this one gave, this one never gave it there. They
No, it's
took it,
important that you have clarity too, so that, yeah, that's good.
Great, thank you.
both parties.
All right, so I think that motion carried. Yeah, we were done with that. All right, so now we're at board comments. I'll start with Lori, as she drinks her Coke.
Sorry, yeah, it caught me just perfect. None, thank you.
Greg? Chaz? Any comment?
None? No.
Bob, any comment?
Not at this time, thank you, sir.
Sandra, any comment? You've been silent tonight.
I know. I did just want to follow up on 6B a little bit in terms of that agreement. I should have spoken up then, but it's everything is great. We love our partnership with CAMPO. One other piece in terms of the extension is that we're, in addition to the decennial census, the current authorization bill expires this year. So this carries us forward. Hopefully Congress takes action in the next 2 years and we'll revisit it at that time. As Lucia mentioned, we don't expect any substantial changes to that, but that gives us the ability, we can always change it sooner than that if we need to, but it gives us the ability to just carry on as we have been for the next 2 years and make it easy. The only other thing is we are currently working on our annual work program and short range element for the state and SIP update. So kind of using that One Nevada implementation process and developing a more transparent, more data-driven prioritization process. And we'll be presenting that to our board for information in July and hopefully approval in August. And we'll certainly coordinate with Lucia and staff if there's anything, any big changes for any of our plans in Carson City. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Bob or Sandra or anyone, can you tell me when the project for the Lyon County there that's going to Silver Springs right now will be completed? Is she just like, uh-oh, bad answer?
I will have to get back to you on that. I don't have the specific project schedules.
Thank you for that, Lori. I appreciate it.
Like that answer too. Great, thank you.
All right, well, we had no answer, but we have somebody with a homework assignment, I guess, there. I guess Lucia will put the word out, or Dirk will put the word out. Thank you. All right, so done with board comments. The next meeting is 4:30 here on TV and in person on July 8th in Sierra Room. Now's a chance for public comment if there's anybody on the air for this CAMPO meeting.
There is no final comment, Mr. Board.
Okay, great. So I'm looking for a motion for adjournment. So moved, and what time would you like to come back for RTC? 5:25. 5:25 is back to RTC board. Thank you.
order this meeting of the Carson City Regional Transportation Commission. It is Wednesday, June 10th, 2020. We are in the Sierra Room at the Community Center in Carson City. It is 5:25 p.m. Tonight, we have one item on the agenda. Typically, we take public comment at the beginning and the end of the meeting, but we do have one item on the agenda. It's agenda item 6A that we will be taking public comment on during that item as well, as I believe that there's an indication that we'll have significant public comment on that item. So we will have public comment 3 times, at the beginning of the meeting, at the end of the meeting, and on agenda item 6A. Having said that, I'm going to read into the record this notice. Public comment limitations. Although the RTC often provides an opportunity for additional public comment during each specific item designated for possible action on the agenda, public comment will temporarily be limited to the beginning of the agenda before any action is taken, and again at the end before adjournment, with the exception of agenda item 6A. This policy will remain effective during the period of time the state of Nevada is under a state of emergency as declared by the governor due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and is intended to achieve the efficient conduct of meetings while facilitating public participation via video conference and telephonic means. Can we have a roll call, please, Tamara?
Chair Bonkowski.
Here.
Vice Chair Kimbrough. Commissioner Bagwell. Commissioner McQuarrie.
Here.
Commissioner Stedfield. A quorum's present.
Thank you. We're on agenda item 2, agenda management notice. Are there any items to be moved or changed or pulled tonight?
No, Mr. Chair.
Any member of the commission have an item that they wish to pull or change? Seeing none, we will move on. We will adopt the agenda as published, and we will move on to agenda item number 3, disclosures. Any member of the RTC board that has a disclosure to make tonight? Everybody shaking their heads no. We will move on to the first public comment period, agenda item number 4. For those of you that are waiting for public comment, if you are going to comment on the FLAP grant for Kings Canyon, I would ask that you hold your public comment until the next item that's coming up, which is after the approval of the minutes, which will be agenda item 6A. Is there any other public comment under agenda item 4? Just general public comment?
I see no public comment, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Then we will move to agenda item 5 for possible action, discussion of possible approval of the May 13th, 2020 draft minutes. If the commission members have had a chance to review the minutes.
Move for approval of the May 13th.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing and seeing none. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed say nay. The vote is 5-0. The motion passes. All right, we're now on the public meeting items. Item 6A for information only, to provide a public update and solicit comments on the Kings Canyon Road and Trailhead project. This is a federal lands access program, FLAP grant, project for trailhead, roadway, and stormwater improvements between the Kings Canyon Trailhead and just east of Canyon Drive and Kings Canyon Road intersection. Dirk.
Thank you, Chair. And I have a PowerPoint for this item. And here it comes. So the project before you tonight is a project which includes transportation and recreation elements. The 70% plans are being presented to the RTC tonight and to a joint meeting between the Parks Commission and the Open Space Advisory Committee, which is being held on June 15th, which is next Monday. Today, the RTC is being asked for comments regarding the 70% plans for the transportation-related items associated with Kings Canyon Road and the Trailhead project. Kings Canyon is a historic toll road built in 1860s, approximately 160 years old. In November of 2017, the city submitted an application with our, I'm pausing 1 second to make sure that the PowerPoint is back on the, is showing. If it's all right with the board.
Desi, we
can-
can't get it on going.
If it's all right with the board, I'll go through my comments, and then once we get it up and running, we'll go back and make sure all the slides are shown so that all the information is available. Okay. So, starting in November 2017, the city submitted an application with RTC approval. The application was written in conjunction with the Carson City Parks and Open Space staff, as well as the U.S. Forest Service, who signed the application. The grant application is supported by the following master plans. The Carson City Master Plan, which stresses the importance of a high quality of life and acknowledges the connection between recreation and quality of life. So just backing up for the record, on screen is a map of the project. So this kind of goes starting on the west side. This starts on the trailhead to access the Kings Canyon Road and the Kings Canyon waterfall. And then also it continues down to the second crossing of Kings Canyon. It's just under a mile long. Oh, actually, I want to say it's about 3/4 mile long. So right now I'm talking about the purpose and giving you a little bit of background information on the grant. So there's an estimated about 31,000 pedestrians and about 2,200 bicyclists that use this area annually. And these are from counts collected prior to the application. The Carson City Unified Master Pathway Plan on page 11-6 identifies a priority to improve the trailhead at the Kings Canyon/Waterfall Trail and to improve access for equestrian users. There's also a 2005 Kings Canyon Travel Management Plan produced by the United States Forest Service that supports access to national forest lands for hiking, biking, equestrian use, and off-road vehicles. Carson City received tentative approval of the grant in 2018. In May of 2018, staff from Central Federal Lands, the Forest Service, and Carson City scoped the project on site. In August of 2018, the RTC approved an agreement with Central Federal Lands, and the Open Space Advisory Committee agreed to contribute partly to the required 5% local match. In September of 2018, the city sent a letter to 51 property owners who used this portion of Kings Canyon as access to their homes. The letter introduced the project and informed residents that survey teams may be on site. In October of 2018, Public Works and Open Space staff met with 2 property owners immediately abutting the trailhead to discuss the project. In April of 2019, the city received 30% design plans. At this time, a second letter was sent to the same property owners on April 22nd, 2019, informing the public that plans are online and are available at the library and at Public Works. Additionally, we invited the residents to meet with staff. Plans were presented to the RTC, Parks Commission, and the Open Space Advisory Committee in October and November of 2019. On February 11th, 2020, a third letter was sent regarding stakes that were placed on the property by surveyors hired by Central Federal Lands. On May 22nd of this year, a fourth letter was sent out to abutting properties and surrounding property owners regarding the 70% design plans and informing residents that plans are available online and that staff was happy to meet on site and virtually. Staff has enjoyed meeting with the public. Public comment has been received regarding concerns with the roadway safety and concerns related to the intensification of the use. Staff has enjoyed hearing the comments and has been responsive. The design has evolved based on these comments, which will be shared here during this presentation. Staff has aimed to strike a balance between the needs of the immediate neighborhood, regional access needs, and best practices for roadway designs. So just as an example, we recently met with one of the neighbors who had concerns about the crossing, which has come up quite a few times. And so we've been able to send our street crews out, and we've cleaned up some of the vegetation by the lower crossing.
For the record, this is Chris Martinovich, Transportation Traffic Engineer. The picture there on the left is the before, and the one on the right is the after the bushes have been cut back away from the roadway. So we can see the signs there in the second picture on the left.
When was this done? The trimming?
Yesterday.
I just think it's important to put it on the record so we all understand that this just happened. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And so with that, I would like to transition to Chris Martinovich, who is the city's transportation engineer, and he'll go into the design details.
Thanks, Dirk. And just for the record, Chris Martinovich, Transportation Traffic Engineer for the city. Want to touch on some of the design elements related to the project and touch on some of the concerns and some of the comments we've heard and try to address reasons for some of the design decisions and go into some more of the detail. So I'm going to first start with the roadway width. The existing roadway of Kings Canyon is generally between 19 and 24 feet. 23 to 24 feet is common. It gets a little bit narrower at the top, and it gets a little narrow there at the lower creek crossing. But in general, it's 23, 24 feet wide. The proposed pavement section of the proposed roadway section, currently designed in the 70% plan, calls for a 30-foot total paving or 30-foot total roadway width, which includes two 11-foot travel lanes, a 4-foot bike lane in the uphill direction, a 2-foot shoulder in the downhill direction, and two additional 1-foot wide graded shoulders. So that's the total of 30 feet. It would be a total of 28 feet of actual pavement, which would be an increase of 4 feet from the existing condition. I want to go back, Dirk, thanks. Sorry. I want to touch on a few other items related to why the road was kind of designed the way it was. So Carson City standard details kind of indicate for a collector road with a bike lane, the distance between the center line of the road to the edge of pavement should be 18 feet, which would imply you do both sides of the road. That would be 36 feet of total paving. That same standard detail also indicates you would put 4 feet of graded shoulder beyond the edge of pavement, which would give you a 44-foot total roadway section. The design is proposed as 30 feet, which is less than the city's standard detail. I do want to mention also, we've designed our roads in accordance with the American Association for State Highway Transportation Official Guidelines, or AASHTO, and so they provide a lot of design guidance. And so while we are less than current city standard details, we are still within our acceptable national standards for design of a roadway like this.
Chris, what is the city right-of-way
The city right-of-way is 60 feet.
in this location?
It varies significantly in some areas, but in general, it's 60 feet.
So some of the letters that we've received, there were concerns from the neighbors that the roadway would be encroaching on their property, but that's not the case. The entire roadway, all improvements would be within the city right-of-way.
I'm going to touch on right-of-way in a second. There are some driveway easements that are required.
Thank you.
So I want to get a little bit more into the bike lane. So we've heard a lot of comments about the bike lane in particular, and why are we providing a bike lane? So the road is generally has a 9% grade, plus or minus. It varies, but generally it's a 9% gradient in the uphill from the lower creek crossing to the waterfall trail. We're providing a bike lane in accordance with AASHTO's bicycle guidelines, which indicate that for bicycle facilities on a steep gradient, having a bike lane in the uphill direction provides a place for slower moving cyclists or other users to get out of the travel lane. We're not providing a bike lane in the downhill direction because that same guidance indicates that due to the grade of the road, bicycles can generally approach speeds similar to vehicles, and the need to provide a separate bike facility isn't specifically needed. So we're designing our bike facilities in accordance with the AASHTO guidelines. Additionally, there's been additional safety studies completed by Federal Highway Administration that generally indicate the need for rural collectors to have a space for slower moving vehicles to limit the potential of being hit in the rear, right? So a vehicle comes up, surprises a cyclist or other user. So we're providing that area for a bicycle to get out of the travel lane in this particular instance. 4 feet is the standard width for a bicycle facility. But there are other benefits to having a wider shoulder as well that I want to touch on beyond the bicycle facility. So specifically, Having additional paving beyond the edge of the travel lane provides a place for the snow during snow removal to sit. It provides a wider width of the road for emergency vehicles and emergency response to get up to the canyon should there be a fire or some other event up there. It provides a place should a vehicle become disabled or something to that effect, a place to get off of the road and without blocking the road. Shoulders also provide benefit to the paving itself. We talked earlier, in the previous CAMPO meeting about the need to preserve the life of our pavement. Having additional shoulders provides an area for a vehicle should they leave the lane to ensure that the pavement doesn't start to deteriorate and start deteriorating in the lane itself. So that's one of the reasons and one of the benefits of a gravel shoulder is that it kind of limits the erosion and the potential for the edge of the pavement to start crumbling and diminish off the edge and slope off into the drainage channel. So there are benefits to graded shoulders and having wider shoulders on our roadway facilities. I want to touch on the structural section or the paving section for the roadway. We've heard some comments that we're just coming in and overlaying the road from what it is. So the actual plan is to actually pulverize the existing pavement, remove and bring in aggregate base, mix it in with the subgrade, grade it off level, and then put a brand new 4 inches of asphalt on top of that new structural base section. So we'll be fully reconstructing the road, full depth reconstruction for this length. It'll be 4 inches of pavement. Speaking of driveway approaches, which I touched on briefly a second ago regarding right-of-way, we are reconstructing every driveway approach on Kings Canyon Road. So we'll be mirroring the existing driveways. So in other words, if you have a concrete driveway, the new driveway approach will be concrete. If you have an asphalt driveway, the new driveway approach will be asphalt. If you have a gravel driveway, the new driveway approach will be asphalt. So we'll be making sure that every driveway is either asphalt or concrete, and nothing less than that. In addition, we'll be providing new culverts at every driveway on Kings Canyon. As part of the roadway reconstruction, we'll be regrading the roadside ditches on the edge of the road. And so that necessitates upgrading of the drainage facilities along the road. And Rob Fellows is back here if we have specific questions on some of the stormwater requirements. But every driveway culvert will be upgraded to a 15 or 18 inch culvert, which is consistent with our anticipated storm event in the corridor. It's those driveways approaches and the reconstruction of those approaches that may necessitate the need for temporary construction or other access to the property to make sure that connection to Kings Canyon is maintained. All that being said, we've had some discussions with Central Federal Lands regarding the roadway width, and we've heard a lot of comments that the roadway width is a concern, increasing it by 4 feet to 28 feet. Staff is consulted with Central Federal Lands, and we'd be willing to reduce the pavement width of the travel lanes from 11 feet to 10 feet, in essence reducing the total width by 2 and having the pavement width be 26 feet instead of 28 feet. So that would be 2 feet wider than the existing pavement, but 2 feet less than the 70% design as currently showed in the plans. So we're certainly happy to make that accommodation. Okay, Dirk, now's a good chance. Change it. Thank you. Questions about speed have come up. The current posted speed limit on Kings Canyon Road is 35 miles per hour. We are proposing to post the speed limit at 30 miles an hour, which is a reduction of 5 miles per hour. This speed limit will be consistent with the design speed and consistent with Carson City Code as well as our speed limit policy for the new facility. We've heard some comments that additional pavement may increase the potential speeding of the road and some other concerns regarding that. And so we are planning on signing and striping the road, which it currently is not. We are going to put white edge lines to define the actual shoulder in the downhill direction and the bike lane in the uphill direction. We would also be putting a double yellow center stripe down the middle of the road to define the 2 travel lanes, which is going to be consistent with the section just to the south or just to the east of this. We've done some additional research regarding how striping affects speed, and there really is no definitive result that indicates striping a road causes traffic to increase speed. The highway capacity manual indicates that generally striping roads, particularly edge striping, has an effect of generally reducing speed by a couple of miles per hour. However, staff is working with Central Federal Lands on some possible other signing and striping components that we can implement as part of the project to further enhance the knowledge of the speed and reduce the speed, and particularly in the downhill direction. Additionally, related to signing and striping, we are proposing to put guideposts along the edges of the roadway. These are those white or those metal posts that you kind of see dotted along the edge of the road with little reflectors on top. I think there's like 2 out there on this section of Kings Canyon today. They've just worn out and become run over or wiped out or whatever the reason. So we are going to have those, and those are going to serve as kind of a vertical visual element as to where the edge of the road is, and it's going to kind of give you a defined pathway for the roadway facility. They'll provide safety benefits in poor weather. They'll provide safety benefits at nighttime. There'll be a visual reflector, and you'll be able to see the edge of the road better than you can today. I'm going to touch now a little bit on environmental. We've heard some comments about the environmental, and I really want to focus on the roadway environmental. So Federal Highways, Central Federal Lands is completing a categorical exclusion, which is an environmental document in conformance with the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA. So they are completing that work, and it includes an evaluation of things like biological resources, cultural resources, wetland impacts, and things of that nature. And it's really focused on the roadway and on the trailhead parking, and we're not focusing on the trail itself. I know that there's been some comments regarding the environmental components of the trail itself and access to the waterfall, and Greg Berggren is here if we have any specific questions, but I think a lot of those will come up potentially at next week's Park and Open Space Commission meeting. Last thing I want to mention on environmental is that the city's water department is currently doing some studies regarding water quality safety, and so there's a component for environmental they're looking at separately as well. I want to move on to storm drain if I could. So like I mentioned earlier, we are improving the roadside ditches and the driveway culverts along the entire length of the roadway to keep the water in the channels. Currently, I think there's some areas where the water fills up the roadside ditch because it's very shallow, flows across the road or flows into people's properties, and we want to keep the water that's on the road in the road and channel it to where we want it to go. We are proposing a new culvert crossing, reconstruction of the existing culvert crossing at the Upper Creek location, and that will be a new 6-foot wide by 4-foot tall reinforced box culvert. The existing culvert, I think, is a 30 or 36-inch corrugated pipe, and it doesn't have the capacity to meet a type of a flood event that could be possible up there, as we all know. So the new box culvert will be designed to meet a 50-year type storm and convey the water under the roadway. The new box culvert also has the ability to limit how much debris gets caught up on it. So when you have a small culvert, a lot of debris can get caught up on the head wall, requiring city maintenance to come up and remove that. Also pushes the water outside of and away from the culvert and down the road. A larger culvert will allow some of that debris to pass through this location and keep the water in the culvert in the channel where it's supposed to be. Regarding the Lower Creek crossing, we are doing some improvements down there, including the construction of a new head wall on the downstream or the north side of the road. This includes removal of the existing wooden fence that's down there and installation of new pedestrian railing along that head wall. A few years ago, the city did a project to provide kind of a diversion, and so that project is remaining. We're not changing that. We're just adding a new head wall for the outlet of those culverts. We are looking at some other items to do at that location, including trimming the trees, which we mentioned has been completed, but there'll be further reduction of some of the bushes in that location that will enhance some of the site distance and is required for the construction of the project itself at that location. We do know that space is limited at this location, and we're working with Central Federal Lands to ensure that we get this consistent roadway section across that Lower Creek crossing. Regarding the trailhead parking, I'll kind of move up to the top of the end of the project, top of the road. The current trailhead parking is designed for 30 vehicles. It has 30 parking spots plus 2 additional spots for trailer use. So for off-road vehicles who want to park there and drive their vehicles up the road into Forest Service property, we are providing that. The parking facility will also have gates on both approaches to the road. And Dirk, maybe we go to the next slide, please. It's got a kind of a map of the trailhead parking. So this is a map of the trailhead parking area. So right now, it's kind of a loop road where you could kind of go in or out of either road there, and the parking's in between. So both of those accesses to the parking area will be gated at night, and the Parks Department, I'll kind of, if there's questions related to that, Greg can answer those. But the idea is the Parks Department would close those gates each night and reopen them in the morning and prevent vehicles from parking there overnight to limit some of the activities that we know can occur in certain times. In addition, the parking area provides a place for emergency response, so it now has a place for fire trucks to come in, and there's sufficient room to turn around and loop around. Also, snowplows or any other delivery vehicles that happen to use the canyon, we're providing a better place to turn around. We are still working with Central Federal Lands related to what happens for vehicles turning around if the parking lot's closed, say in the middle of the night. And so we're working through that design to make sure there's sufficient space for a vehicle to come up and actually make a turn and come back down should the gates be locked. Regarding the parking as well, we've heard a lot of comments about the size of the parking lot. Like I said, it's 30 parking spaces. In some discussions with staff and the Parks and Open Space Department, we are evaluating the potential reduction of 5 spots to 25 places. And again, if there's additional questions on that, I'll let Greg kind of handle that. But I do want to mention that the number of spots was basically determined based on a kind of a review of the use of the trail pre-March. So I think last summer and into the winter, they did some analysis of how many people were using the trail. Dirk listed the numbers of pedestrians and bicycles that we've seen up there. And we've also done some research with the Washoe County, particularly the Hunter Creek trailhead, which has a waterfall and it's kind of similar use, similar length trail. And so 25, 30 cars was kind of the number that they were seeing. And so that's kind of how that number was set. Do want to mention also the trail facility is planned to have a restroom. It's right now a 2-stall restroom, and it would be located kind of in the area where Dirk's got the arrow showing. So just kind of the general layout of this parking area. Right now, you can kind of see at the top of the picture under the word area, that's the current parking location. And so the new parking lot is going to be significantly larger in the sense that it's going to continue down to the south and away from the homes. And so the new restroom facilities, the new location of the kiosks and all the signing for the trail will be located several hundred feet to the south of where it's currently located today. We're also moving the trailhead to that location farther south to get it away from some of the adjacent residential houses. So the whole kind of focus of the trailhead is generally moving to the south and away from the existing trailhead location. Let's go into a little bit more of the detail here about some of the plans. So the next couple of slides, I just want to walk through some of the plans set here. So that we're just kind of walking down the road from the trailhead. The top of the picture there, kind of midway on the upper picture is the creek crossing location. Yeah, right there at the arrow. So that's the new reinforced concrete box culvert that would go in on the upper creek crossing, providing some erosion control and energy dissipation at that location as it transitions out of the culvert back into the natural ditch. As we continue down the facility, we have all the driveway culverts are shown on the roadway. Those are those little black triangles, so those are all the new culverts. We also have a turnaround location where we're reconstructing that turnaround right there. We understand that, I guess, the school district uses that as a bus stop, and so we want to make sure that buses can continue to circulate at that location. Go to the next one, Dirk, thanks. Just continuing down the road, we are doing some alignment shifts where we're shifting the road a little bit to the north or the south of its current location, and that's to mitigate some of the impacts to adjacent properties. So that's kind of why you see the road moving around a little bit. Go to the last slide, Dirk. And this is the last slide that shows the lower Kings Creek crossing, and so we can see that we're reconstructing the head wall and we're putting in new pipes on the existing creek location. But again, the existing overflow box culvert that we put in a couple of years ago remains in place and active. So I just want to touch real briefly, and go ahead and one more slide, Dirk, just kind of ongoing activities and next steps. We are working with right-of-way coordination with the property owners. As I mentioned, to reconstruct the driveways, we need to potentially access property to do that. And so we're going to work through that and get temporary construction easements and items necessary to do the work. We're also working with NV Energy and AT&T. The shifts in alignment require the relocation of some of those poles. So I think there's 11 total poles that'll need some adjustment. So that we've met with them in the field, and they are aware of the project and aware of what needs to happen. They also have other needs up there that they're going to implement at the same time. Lastly, kind of the next steps, we're presenting here to the RTC. We'll be presenting Monday to the Parks and Open Space Commission. We'll be gathering those comments from those meetings. We'll be gathering all the comments we've received from the public. We'll be also doing our internal review of the plans, and we'll compiling all those comments, and it'll be provided back to Central Federal Lands probably sometime later this month. Central Federal Lands will take those comments, incorporate the design, and they'll return, I don't know if it's a 90 or a 95% set, but we would anticipate another design submittal back to the city. We would go out for comments similarly, give an update to the board, make sure that the comments we provided to them related to what changes we wanted to the design are incorporated, and we'd move forward from there. The ultimate schedule for the project has Central Federal Lands planning on bidding sometime late in the fall and awarding the project to a contractor probably before the end of the year, right near the end of the year. And they would like to start construction of the project in the spring, summer of 2021, which is about a year from now. So that's kind of the high-level picture of the project schedule. I think I touched on most of the concerns, but I'm certainly willing to entertain any questions. Thanks.
Questions from any of the commissioners? Chaz, do you have any questions?
I do, and comments. So I'm going to start with the trailhead parking. I think the 30 spaces is a minimum. I think that's a good number. We started off with the initial concept at 40 spaces, and that was reduced to 30 as a result of working with the neighbors up there and their concerns. And when you go there on a currently or before COVID on a busy weekend, there's easily 30 vehicles parked there. So we're not increasing the number of people who park there now. We're just formalizing the trailhead parking so that it can be better controlled and better managed. I think the restrooms are appropriate. There's already a problem with anything from diapers and to people who do longer loops up there, trail loops, because there's not just the short trail to the lower waterfall, there's the loop to the upper waterfall. And I feel the restrooms are needed. One thing I have a concern about, and I don't really know what to do about this, is there's going to be significant cuts and fills to build this. And we need to make sure there's appropriate, not just erosion control measures, but also, a bit more than just plain old erosion control. We need some sort of mitigation on those slopes, I feel, whether that's plantings of some sort or something to visually modify that. As Chris mentioned, the turnaround's good for fire protection. There's been some comments that a one-way loop would be safer and have less conflicts between pedestrians, bicyclists, equestrian users, and people backing in and out. There was a version of a one-way loop initially with diagonal parking, and that went away. I still think that it would be a good exercise to look at a one-way loop with diagonal parking, and I don't think you'd lose any spaces. You could arrange the parking spaces to still get 30 spaces in there. Especially if that might help with trailers too, or longer vehicles. There's a new trail that's going to go from the area where the restrooms are and the handicap plaza, for want of a better word, up towards Kings Canyon Road, and eventually that'll be realigned to tie into the current waterfall trail. As currently shown on the plans right now, that trail connection is way too steep and it's in the wrong location. Federal Lands needs to look at relocating that so that A, it's not as steep, and B, it doesn't just get washed out by the first decent runoff event we have. And also, I didn't see in the plans any provision for trash containers and, doggy stations and stuff like that, but I understand those will be added. So when it comes to the road, I support the bike lane. I think that's an excellent idea for the reasons Chris mentioned. And the striping will do two main things. By having a defined vehicle lane, it tells vehicles where their part of the road is. And having a bike lane, it alerts vehicles to the fact that bicyclists use the road. And it also alerts bicyclists to the fact that they're supposed to stay on the right in their, quote, lane. Currently, I ride up there probably at least once every 2 weeks and sometimes every week. And currently, for a car to pass a bicyclist or a pedestrian, they have to use the other side of the road. Usually that's not a problem, but if there's a car coming the other way, the bicyclist or the pedestrian ends up in the ditch, and that has come mighty close to happening to me. So widening the road, I think, is crucial. I do not agree with making it 20, well, I do not agree with reducing the 28 feet of pavement. Chris mentioned there's discussions about reducing it to 26. I'm not in favor of that. I think it should remain the 11-foot lanes and the 4-foot bike lane and the 2-foot shoulder in the downhill direction, because that just gives more buffer space to bicyclists. Last week when I rode up there, I had, for the first time in many years, I had actually had a car that didn't give me 3 feet going up the hill. Nothing coming the other way. It just zoomed by at a good 30, 35 miles an hour, way too close. And so I think the 28 feet of pavement is a critical aspect, and I support that. And the striping, as Chris mentioned, really serves as a traffic calming measure, and I think it will not lead to an overall increase in speed, particularly if it's signed at 30. I'm in my late 60s. I try not to do more than 40 going downhill now. So I'm going to have to watch my downhill speed. Let's see here. Yeah, I think that is, there was a question too about the appropriateness of the concrete sidewalk from the restroom area to the current sort of along the edges of the stalls that are 90-degree stalls. I think concrete is probably appropriate there rather than asphalt or something else. I did notice in one of the public comments that the suggestion that there be a dry hydrant water tank up there, 10,000 gallons. I think that's a good idea. It's obviously not within the current flap scope, but if that can be worked out, I think that would be a good addition to the project from a fire protection standpoint. So I'll just add that. And with that, I am done. Thank you.
Go ahead, Dirk.
Go on, Dirk.
Oh, thank you. One comment I failed to mention at the beginning of this meeting is that staff has received public comment. All that public comment has been distributed online and to the board members. It did come in 2 rounds. There was one round, I want to say last night, and then there was also, I got some comments today, and those have been provided to the commissioners and have been posted online. I'll let Chris respond to some of the comments.
Let's go back. We got one commissioner's comments and questions. So anybody else? Go ahead, Mark.
Well, I was concerned seeing the public comments that I think there's a lot of misinformation, which is not uncommon when there's a neighborhood that has a situation that occurs that brings them all together. So a lot of times not everybody has all the information they need to make the right decision. So I'm going to make some clarity to some of those things. So I was actually involved with that trail before it was built with the design and construction. So the public used to go up the road and up the creek, right up the creek. And it was a trail that you couldn't take grandma on or the kids on. I guess you could pull the kids up. It was you climb a couple scramble places and all of the sediment went right into the creek. So a long time ago, it was decided when the social network started announcing the existence of the waterfall trail in several places and even newspaper articles about this as one of the few opportunities in Nevada. So it became kind of a special place really quick. So we went to design a trail to get up there, and it was not an easy task from where the parking lot was. So we had to put a switchback in that was terrible because nobody bays switchbacks. So this new location will be wonderful because you can get rid of that switchback in there. But there was a lot of construction that went on to get people there. And and that place was designed to do loops. So I did the second loop too, which is 3 miles, which is a bathroom call for most people, for if you have kids and stuff. So I have problems that they're misinforming they're going to do a half-a-mile trail. That's not true. There's several options there. There's people that do all the way up, go to the Ashley Kings, and you can come down the road back to your car, or you can do the 3 mile loop that we built that's part of the program there that you can hike up and get views up above. So restrooms and trailheads get kind of important when you start having trails that are longer like that. And it's also an OHV parking area. People go up Kings Canyon. That's one of my questions later is if there's people up Kings Canyon, how they get home that night if they're after the gate time. So you can drive down from Tahoe with a mountain bike and also, or a dirt bike if you're good. And if that road ever gets fixed, there'll be a lot of traffic up and down there. And that will allow OHVs to actually go up Kings Canyon, cross the highway, and get on the Kingsbury section, and you can OHV all the way to South Shore on the few OHV trails you have within the basin and the site. So there's a lot of traffic there, and this isn't all about the waterfall trail, which is if you build it, they'll come, and they did. But what happened in that transition was before there were a lot of gangbangers going up there, a lot of graffiti, a lot of problems and call-outs late at night. The kids would go up there. So what has happened is because now that the public's there, that's what you want. You bring the public into your facility and then less vandalism and less problems with the user groups that come there. Because there's families there, dogs and kids and the whole thing. So it changes the kind of what happens there in the facility. So they loved it to death, which is a problem, but it's just one of those sites. So this parking to me was perfect size. The restrooms are CXTs, they don't smell. This is from 50 years in Parks and Recreation. That was a wonderful invention. They came out with a CXT, which has a reasonable design, and the toilets don't smell. And that's one of the things that was brought to parks that everybody buys them now. Forest Service has hundreds of them. So I hope they don't lose a restroom because you lose an opportunity from a grant to build those things. So that trail has a lot more to it in history, so that there's some confusion when you get half the information about what goes on there. So, and there's, as we talked about, the ATVs and the motorized in there too, so that will, once you get the parking in there, those folks become an element of it, but it seems like the waterfall users in the other loop will be the primary users most of the time. And then I've been on a couple of major groups that were formed. One was Sierra Front Recreation Coalition that had the Forest Service and the county park systems and the state park system that we gathered 4 times a year. One of the biggest issues that the Forest Service was most concerned about, which you guys actually don't know you're part of that, the Thompson Creek Trailhead, is access to the Sierras, because there's private land all along the Sierra Front. So they're very cognizant of the fact that the public really should have access to public land. And this road's been there since when? 1800s, that road's been there. And it's access to the Sierras. So taking advantage of this and making a reasonable, nice facility without minimal 5% cost to the city is just absolutely phenomenal. There's not a lot of flap grants out there that build things like this for communities. So it'd be terrible to lose some of the opportunity with this. So we used to meet and talk about that a lot, where those places go. And Thompson Creek on Hunter Creek was built for that specific reason, to give access to the Sierras. And then Washoe County Parks has built their facilities to access the Sierras because there's so much private land along the edge. So there's a lot of history behind this little tiny parking lot about how it all became a reality and then how we're going to manage it. What we've done is we've invited too many people to an area that doesn't have facilities for it. Absolutely terrible facilities, and parking up and down the road and everywhere else. So we finally have a chance to do like they did it over at Lakeview. That was also a community fun time, deciding what to do over there to to compromise and allow the users to use that. So it's normal for the neighborhood to come forward and express their views, but I would hope they're better informed. So when they sign a petition, there's more to it than what some of the elements were in the letter from that one gentleman, which I respect those as part of the comments he needs to make, but he didn't have the full picture that was there and all the history that went into that trail. And to make it a wonderful experience for your kids. And one of the best things I saw there was a veteran group came up and about a third of them had false limbs part, and they were able to walk the trail before you could never have gone to the waterfall. It was not public access, and they were destroying that in there. So, and it's taken a while. We put some nice fences in there to try to get people beyond the erosion control. And if you've noticed the kiosk there, we even had a grant from NDP about the water quality, and that's what that trail was about. And the wooden walls that are up there would have stopped the erosion into the creek, get people out of the creek, and inform them that that's your drinking water you're playing in up there and stuff. So it was an educational experience too. So there's just a lot. I could sit here for 2 hours because it's my profession, and I won't because Brad's going to kick me here in a minute and say, let's get it up. So I'm going to speak to that, and I'm going to speak to that at open space because I think this is a huge, great opportunity, and I just hate seeing it pass without doing what's kind of in the plan at 70%. So that's the end of what I'm going to say. Thanks.
Greg, Lori?
So I'd like to comment on Miss Preston's idea, following up with Chaz, on the dry hydrant and water storage tank. I don't know if there's any opportunities or anything that we can marry up with the project. If we're going to have things staged already, it tends to make sense to add a necessary component. A flavor of everything that I read, positives, negatives. It seems to me that fire is a true concern and issue, and we certainly have experience with that here. So I think the residents have brought up a very good point, and so I'd like to see if there's anything we can do to help alleviate that concern. And so certainly having water, it bothers me when when we lose power, we lose the ability to run even their own pumps and their own wells, and there's no hydrants. And so if there's something we can do there, I'd like us to consider that. And then there was another comment. Sorry, I can't find where it was, but I can remember it I can paraphrase it, about creating a tow zone when people are parked where they don't belong. And so I'd like us just to look, doesn't mean initially, but I don't want us to lose sight of that if necessary, we create the tow zone if the public is not respecting those homeowners' space, their property, their line of sight, because I think that when I look at what they're writing about, it's all about safety. I don't think they're trying to actually not like a lovely project. I think they're concerned. And so if there's something we can do to monitor that and look at it and make a decision if there's some public safety improvements in this project, I'd like us to consider that. Thank you.
And so going through the letters and comments that we've received, and a lot of this is things that have already been mentioned by Chaz, Lori, and Mark. Fire is a reoccurring theme up there. So I agree, if there is a way to look at a water tank, whatever agencies we would want to pull in to look at that, to try to get that included during the project period, even if it's by another agency in another project, it just makes sense. Irrespective of this project, that area is an issue for fire, and we have other tanks, water tanks, to mitigate other areas that are mentioned in the letter from Ms. Preston. So that's an area that we should look at while we have this opportunity. Another item that comes up several times is enforced parking restrictions, which Lori was just talking about. Some of that can be handled through signage for a tow zone. The other item that I'd like to see signage for is the trailer parking. And as an example, if you go on the Carson River access site. So when I kayak the river, I have a 21-foot kayak. So I have to have a 18-foot trailer that I haul that on. So there are about 10 trailer parking spots in that parking lot and about 30 car parking spots. The last 2 times I've been to that parking lot, there were single cars parked in the trailer parking spots, single cars. There were 14 car spots that were open. Every trailer spot was taken by a single car. So areas like that, we need to look at providing signage to say, be considerate. If you have a car, don't park in a trailer parking, especially when there's 14 car parking spots open. So signage, again, that's one thing that we should look at. And then another reoccurring theme from the letters that we received, as well as some of the phone calls and people that have contacted me, is increased park ranger patrol. I don't know if that's economically feasible for the city. That'll be something for the Parks and Rec Commission to look at and maybe bring some recommendations back. But that was another reoccurring theme. So those are the, if staff has any comments on any of those items before we take public comment, I'll hear those now, and then we'll open up the lines for public comment. So Chris, you want to start, and then Dirk, you want to finish? Okay.
So the few things I'll touch on, I failed to mention in my presentation, I have this whole page of notes, and you still forget things. I did want to mention that the no parking signs around the parking area, and so we certainly plan on posting those tow zone, no parking tow zone type signs. We're also looking at other methods, including potentially placing curb or fencing or other methods that would physically prevent a vehicle from parking adjacent to the road. We're looking with federal lands about maybe increasing some slopes so that it's uncomfortable to park your car in areas where we can't put a curb or a fence or something. And so we're looking for different ways from a design standpoint to actually limit the ability for a vehicle to park outside of the parking lot. So we're working with that beyond just signing itself. I do want to mention Chaz's comment about the visual impacts. I know our open space folks are working with the Forest Service regarding what types of slope treatments and erosion control methods are going to be placed. The plans kind of call out some initial concepts. I haven't personally reviewed those concepts to be able to speak much about them, but I know that visual element and that erosion control is an important component given the amount of earthwork associated with this particular location. On the one-way loop, Chaz's comment on that, it's something we have discussed and I think we're open to. I think we're going to look into that a little bit more and see if that's a potential option. Regarding the gate and the gate closures, the gate would be only on the parking lot itself and not on the road. And so the road would remain open up and down, but we'd just be gating the parking lot off, and Parks would be responsible to do that. And they're, I think, still working out some of the details as to what happens at, say it's 9 o'clock and it's time to close the gate and there's 4 cars parked in there. So there's still some details related to that have to be worked out. I'll touch lastly on some of the fire elements, and maybe Dirk has a little bit more information. The Prestons kind of introduced this idea a few days ago. We thought it was an excellent idea, and I know that there's been some discussion about that in the past, it sounds like. And so we can coordinate with the fire department or other agencies as needed.
Thank you, Chris. Just to add on to the fire, we have reached out to fire. The tank, the purchasing of the tank is something that wasn't never in the scope of the project. So I've reached out to some folks in fire. It's something that's not budgeted currently, but based on the comments that we heard tonight, I think that staff will reach out to the fire department and have that discussion with them. Because if funding was found for the purchasing of a tank, and we can figure out how to make it work from making sure that there's water from the creek and into the tank, and the tank could be located in the proximity of the trailhead, which would allow us to have it kind of installed with the FLAP grant. So the biggest hurdle that I see right now is purchasing the tank, and so we'll start having those conversations with the fire department. Lastly, I'll let Greg talk about how the management of the trailhead will change because of the FLAP grant and other things as well.
For the record, Greg Bergeron, Trails Coordinator with Parks, Recreation, and Open Space. And I just wanted to address the chairman's comment about ranger patrols. So right now, our department has 2 rangers that cover 8,000 acres, so it's pretty thin, because that includes all of our major parks, Mills Park and things like that. We have sought an additional ranger. We know that this trailhead will need some increased patrols, and so part of what we're looking for is we believe that through design we can manage this trailhead a lot better than what's happening right now, and part of that component is right now the trailhead is on U.S. Forest Service land, and it will be after we do this project, but we're going to enter a management agreement with the Forest Service so that the city will have control to manage the whole parking lot. And we've also thought about some other ideas, like perhaps on some of the busy weekends in the summertime, maybe we could have a volunteer, like a trailhead host or something that could be present to help out with whatever issues might come up at the trailhead. But we are looking at ways to be able to manage it better with the staff that we have, and being able to close gates at night would be a big step towards doing that, towards addressing some of the issues that we hear right now about the activities that go on there at night.
Just to add on to Greg's comments, at the beginning of this project, we met with the Stokes, who are abutting, and also the Walshes, and from day one, nighttime partying has had a huge impact on their quality of life. And so as this design evolved, the gating of this community to stop folks from partying in that circle, going to the trailhead at night, I think will add some measures to improve the existing quality of life for the folks up there.
Go ahead, Mark, and then I'll open it up for public
I just
comment.
want, having spent 10 years at Sand Harbor, I would highly recommend you do not put a tow zone in. You wouldn't believe the problems you have if you start towing people's cars, unless they're in a travel lane. Then you take the time. You can be out gone an hour. It could have I've had tow trucks wreck the cars that they're towing. I've had the angry owners come down and want to kill you because you're towing their car. But there's all these things that come, but a parking violation, sure, and have no parking signs, but try not to put a tow zone because it usually isn't enforced because it's such a pain. If you don't do it right, you have to inventory their car, so you can be there for an hour sometimes with the car, especially if you find something you're not supposed to find in the car. It gets to be a mess. And then where they go and where they're stored and how they get to them and they close at 5 and then this teenager shows up with no car, no phone, no money, so it's a mess. So I'm just going to say, let's put parking signs and let's not tow them unless they're in the travel lane. Then you get them out.
Any final questions or comments from staff or the commissioners?
Last comment from me is that, when you're making changes and you're doing improvements, there's kind of 3 elements, right? Design, enforcement, and education. Staff believes that there's improvements that are safety improvements from design. The trailhead location is also going to be improved. There's going to be new kiosks, and it's going to be a more formal trailhead. Now it's kind of a very rural, if you will, primitive site. And so there's going to be education opportunities, and there will be a lot of signage that will be in the plans at 95% that will be included in the next round of plans. And so we plan on using all 3 of those to really make improvements to this area.
All right, at this time, I'm going to open it up for public comment. Desi, do we have people on the line for public comment?
Yes, we have a few callers on the line. Scott Kula.
Scott, go ahead.
Hi there. Yeah, I hope you can hear me well. I do not have great internet connection because I am a resident of Kings Canyon.
We can hear you well.
Okay, well, if my signal goes in and out, you'll know why. I do want to just say we've seen the wonderful power of brainstorming just in these last few moments of ideas that have been brought to bear on the Canyon project, especially, for example, the water tank for fire suppression. So we have created a group, Citizens for Responsible Access, and I want to say our interests are really aligned with this project, but we're acting this way because there have been no public meetings that have occurred. The initial announcement of the project in a letter in September of 2018 stated, a public meeting will be scheduled at the beginning of 2019 to share preliminary designs and take comments. And that meeting never occurred, and nor was there any other mention of a public meeting in any subsequent communication about the project. There were always invitations to speak privately with the designer, which we appreciate. However, you do lose the power of groupthink, you do lose the power of synergy and good ideas when you just split people off and take them one at a time. So we believe input from the community at large and the residents impacted can help make the project better. And it really hinges on manageability and sustainability. You know, someone mentioned if you build it, they will come. And of course, we all remember the end of the movie Field of Dreams, where there's a 5-mile line of cars waiting to get to this baseball park. So I do understand that we want people to have access up here to this wonderful resource. We just want to reemphasize what Greg said, and that is good design helps management. And so we'd like a more thorough vetting of the project before it moves along. And I feel that way you guys can lean into that input. And that input really can only be discovered when there is a community working synergistically. We've already seen unintended consequences of the existing improvements. I don't know if anybody's been to the waterfall lately. Has anybody been up to the waterfall in the last month?
You see some heads nodding yes.
Okay, I went up there yesterday, and I took pictures. I do appreciate the attempts to prevent trail erosion and cutting through the switchbacks, but the railing fences that were put up have been walked around, and those switchback cuts have been maintained. There were 6 cars in the parking lot yesterday at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. When I got to the waterfall area itself, the lower waterfall, there was not room for me to get in there. On the south side of the waterfall, there's an area of 5 feet by 10 feet, roughly. I'm sorry, well, 5 by 10 feet roughly. On the opposite side, when you cross the creek, you've got an area maybe 20 by 30 feet, and there were people on both sides walking in and out of the water. So we do have a management issue, and Chaz mentioned he rides his bike up the canyon quite a bit. What about the road from Longview up to the lower creek crossing? That road is only 23 feet wide. There's no room for bicycles there. And so we're going to move from a 23-foot wide access road to a wider road. I'm not sure that's really the best idea. So I do want to just say I'm excited about the project, and I appreciate Dirk's spending time with me individually, personally, but I do feel there are a lot more issues that need to be addressed and that the council needs to be made aware of besides just the ones that we've been able to address through individual meetings.
Thank you, Scott. Next public commenter.
Juan Guzman.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. You are all familiar with my accent. It is my pleasure to present testimony to you on behalf of Muscle Powered. Muscle Power is very much in favor of this project because for the reasons that you pretty much have already covered. We just wanted to stress that the project will not only serve the waterfall, it also serve as staging for additional trails that are being constructed, specifically the Lincoln Bypass and the Cap to Cap Trail, which is really a trail connecting the Ash Canyon to Kings Canyon Trail with the Tahoe Rim Trail. So what we envision in the future is that people will drive to this trailhead, park, and then ride their bicycle off-road through the bypass trail to the access of Ash Canyon, and then from there move on. The road itself is difficult to traveling a bicycle because it's so steep, the unpaved portion of the road. That's why also we want to build an off-road trail that will facilitate the connection to the access of Ash Canyon Trail. And as you know, we're very proud that Ash Canyon Trail was designated in 2015 as the Trail of the Americas by the American Trail Association. It was a very honoring and distinguishing moment for Muscle Power and Carson City to receive that award. So the point was, again, that there has to be enough spaces in the parking lot to accommodate the future use, which is not only the waterfall, also the OHB community. In addition to that, it is important to separate the horses or the equestrian users and the bicycles and the hikers, and to the best extent that we can do that, like it's proposing the plans through the use of sidewalks and different surfaces. It's really appreciated. The use of a lane, of a back lane, going on the last mile of road is just incredibly useful. That's when you are the most fatigued. I am just about to fall over sideways as a personal climber or using that road for training because I have to go so slow because it's so steep. So it will be a really added welcome facility to have sufficient road, sufficient width, and sufficient designated lane to climb the last mile when you are the most tired. By the same token, I have observed people parking and just walking the road because it's so beautiful. So it will also add to facilitate the safety of those type of users who tend to be less and tend to be more casual, but still are there, which is just walking the paved section of the road. I also wanted to address one more thing, and that is that having the ability to provide access in a safety way through a grant that is requires a 5% match, it is just unheard of. It is a great opportunity. So I will really stress the county and the city and all our commissions to look forward and work out compromises as much as possible, but not to scratch the project, because it is very, very important as a staging site for our trails. There are only two other sites, Ash Canyon and Hobart Road. Hobart Road already have a small facility. Ash Canyon doesn't get anywhere other than to the top. This is the only access that continues and will get you all the way across Highway 50 once the road, is repaired and open, which reminds me of a future project also in the being discussed with the Forest Service and the Parks and Recreation Department, which is calling for the maintenance and repairs of further sections of the unpaved road further up the canyon. Thank you very much for the opportunity. On behalf of Muscle Power, we are 100% behind this project. Any questions?
Thank you, Juan, and pass our thanks on to Muscle Powered for their continued input and volunteer hours.
Be my pleasure.
Next public commenter, Desi.
Caller, it is your turn for public comment. Please state your name for the record.
Vicki Preston.
Go ahead, Vicki.
Thank you and good evening. Listening to the comments, I first became aware of this project 2 years ago. There had been a diversion of storm drainage that wiped out my driveway over the last 5 years. having lived here 40 years, it was just the last 5 years that occurred. So that's when I met 2 years ago with Rob Fellows. He was great. He told me about this federal grant, said not to do anything. I did receive all of the communication. I printed out the 30% map and looked at how it impacted our property. It wasn't until I was able to access the 70% map that it caused me concern, because the map definitely encroaches more on our property than the 30% map did. I've lived up here 40 years. Some of my neighbors, probably 10 neighbors, have lived up here 50 years. You know, as they said, it's the old Lincoln Highway, it's the old Kings Canyon toll road, but more importantly, it's our neighborhood street. It's one way up and one way down, and it services 67, 70 homes up here. You know, I do realize that it's a federal grant to access federal lands, and, you know, my concern after the 2004 waterfall fire was we had no water. Our fire trucks ran out of water. And I advocated for years for a large turnaround with fire and the city. There was no money. There's now money for that. The dry hydrant was always something I advocated for, and I hope that can become a reality. I don't think the cost of the tank itself is that expensive, according to Rod Rummel. But, you know, if we can open up that conversation with the appropriate people, that would be great. The speed of vehicles coming down the road was evident on Monday when we had 3 city employees up here. At one point, a car had to slam on its brakes, not to run over, to hit a deer right above the lower creek, just below my house, and there was a pedestrian coming up at the same time. It was very dangerous, and I do think that they witnessed that. With that being said, you know, I'm hoping that, you know, and I was listening to some of the comments about the 30 spaces. As much as we might think that's too much for the waterfall trail, it does seem like there are other reasons. I'm hoping that the road, I have been on the road between Spooner Summit and my house before the road's washed out, and I'm hoping that at some point the U.S. Forest Service will get that passable again. Anyway, your city employees were wonderful to work with on Friday and Monday, and 2 years ago. So we're not opposed to this. I'm not opposed to the plan. I do think that it is important for us to have input so that it works for the residents of Carson City, but also the residents of Kings Canyon. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Vicki. The next public commenter, Desi.
Caller, it is your turn for public comment. Please state your name for the record. Caller, it is your turn for public comment. Please state your name for the record.
I don't know if anyone in the room is hearing me.
We can hear you now.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. State your name for the record, please.
Yes, hi, this is Charles Clemenson. I appreciate the opportunity to say a few words here. It's been a long meeting for all of you, and I appreciate your bearing with this. This is a complex issue. I have been aware of it. I live not on Kings Canyon Road, but I do live in the canyon. I've resided here for a little over 30 years. A number of points have been raised. I would start with the parking for the waterfall and for access to lands. The one adjunct I would give to that, and Scott spoke briefly to it, I also hiked the trail yesterday morning. The access is a fabulous thing. However, the destination has been so degraded, mostly by foot traffic, that the last 40, 50 feet of the trail leading to the waterfall is no wider than 2 feet, in some areas 1.5 feet. It's bordered on one side by a rock face from the above cliff, and on the other side by part of the creek. When you get to where you have the best view, what I would say is the view area, I measured it yesterday. The area where people can stand is 18 by 36 inches. You can climb up on the rocks, but that's not safe for many people. I think a large part of that has occurred because it's soft ground. People walking have just eroded it away. It erodes into the creek. You can wade across the creek to the other wider area from that side. The wider area was accessed previously by the old trail, which is now closed. As regards water quality, I would suspect that the degrading and the trail sloughing into the creek, together with people routinely wading in and across the creek, probably compromise water quality way more than the previous access did. But that's for discussion. As regards to the number of parking places, currently 90%, 80% of the people parking access the waterfall trail. That may be something that goes away temporarily while we repair that trail or consider other alternatives. Parking has been an issue there for some time. It is possible, and this was not discussed, it's possible for numerous cars, trailers with OHVs, even equestrian trailers, to park on the side of the Forest Service Road, which is easily accessed within several hundred yards of where the existing parking area is. So I would consider the value of constructing 30 or 40 or more parking places with immediately available adjacent parking and no necessity for people to park adjacent to the trailhead if they're not using it. And I think that covers one other issue which has been spoken to by Chris and a number of experts from the planning department is what happens with the road and the justification for a bike lane. I'm aware from researching it that there are almost a historical bias arguing for bike lanes for many years, particularly in cities. Recent research and recent studies from Chicago, Philadelphia, and even Australia have put some question to that. And studies show that, these are studies in the past 24 months, they show that putting a 4-foot bike lane in and striping it results in automobiles, particularly on roads with a striped center lane, automobiles no longer give bicyclists as much passing space. The passing space is reduced by anywhere from 30 to 50%. That passing space is the margin of error that prevents collisions. And not surprisingly, studies from Chicago show as much as a 50% increase in collisions with bicyclists versus auto when bicycles are in a marked marked bicycle lane. That has not been discussed. I'm not sure that Muscle Power is aware of all of that information. I became aware of it researching this when I questioned Dirk a week ago about data proving and establishing the safety of those bicycle lanes, which we all advocate for. As regards the width of the road per se, I appreciated Chaz's comments, and I agree that a wider road does provide a little bit greater escape area for some vehicles. That's especially necessary in this stretch of road because we have a good number of sightseers already who either on the way up or sometimes even on the way down enjoy viewing deer and other wildlife in the area. They sometimes wander well across the road. They frequently slow dramatically and occasionally stop in the road. Even if they were able to pull off a foot or so, they would still obstruct traffic. This is a very unusual stretch of road with a average shade of 9% and areas as much as 14%. Bicycles and cars easily coast at 45 plus miles an hour. There are over 20 private driveways that access directly onto this road. and an additional 4 roads, 3 of which are private, 1 is public. The public road is scheduled for a stop sign, which will be helpful. The private drives certainly are not practical for stop signs. Bicycles traveling down the road now are difficult to see. I have seen a number of instances where residents conflict with those 40-mile-an-hour bicycles. Fortunately, no serious events that I'm aware of. And lastly, the lower access to what we are going to see as a much improved road in the Upper Canyon is going to be at greater hazard still, simply because of the anticipated increased traffic. Traffic is concerning if we have a significant number of vehicles, presumably trucks with trailers. There is no bicycle lane, there's no pedestrian lane in that area of road. There are, however, increasing numbers of bicycles, pedestrians, hikers, and joggers. Those areas have been essentially ignored by the consequences and impact of this plan. And I'd like to see more discussion, more planning, more ideas for traffic and speed control, because without those, I think the consequences could be dangerous, devastating, and even fatal. So I thank you for your time and attention. If you have any questions, please, I'm available here.
Thank you, Charles. Desi, do we have additional public comment?
That is all public comment, Mr. Chair.
So at this time, what I'd like to do is ask each of the commissioners to provide some final direction to staff. So we'll start, Chaz, with you.
So I think that, maybe picking on 3 or 4 things, I think there's been consensus that we really do need to look into the possibility of putting a tank up there for fire suppression. I would like to see staff and the federal highways look at the possibility of a one-way loop. It might narrow the footprint a little bit. We'd have to look at that to see that. I believe the 30 spaces are a good number. I believe the restrooms are a key component of the project, and I like 28 feet of pavement. And I would just say that I really appreciate all the effort staff has put into this. I mean, they spent a lot of time working with residents and working with other interested parties. And I do echo the some thoughts that have been expressed that there is some synergy between getting together, putting many heads together in the room. So I think good design can do a lot to limit the concerns with regard to speed and trailhead inappropriate behavior. That's it.
Thank you, Chaz. Greg?
For myself, excuse me, I kind of echo Chaz's thought that there really should be a meeting with the residences up there just to go over some design issues and try and come to a consensus on some of these issues. I think that's probably the best thing to do.
I don't know how much flexibility you have at 70% without going back to a clean plate again. I mean, a clean map. So meeting with them is a difficult task, I know, especially for consensus. I would somebody's going to have to make a major vote here. That's a tough one when you go back and that's part of neighborhoods that live near facilities. You'll never get them all happy, so consensus is very difficult. But which I don't blame them. I understand that, and I've been in that position before. So I hope this plan moves forward with pretty well what you guys have. The fire tank, we used to have the Fire Safe Council, and I don't think all that money's gone that used to do those kind of things easily with lots of money. And I don't think that exists anymore, but it was a huge fund of money for exactly that, urban interface, fire protection like that. So, there's just a lot of elements in this plan and that people discuss that I support, but as long as it doesn't get nixed, That's all my concern is if it disappears. The compromises, the things you have to do with the community is fine. That's part of doing business. But don't nix it and don't bring the scale down so much that it takes away the effect of what that was meant to happen there at that facility, which were a number of things, the turnaround, the fire, the protecting poor Mr. Stokes' house and the protection from the Rangers. You know, just a point to make that I managed a park that probably had 6 trailheads that had far more use than these do. And this is how much patrol we put into trailheads. You don't have time to do trailheads. So Carson City is a rare example of being able to send staff out to take care of trailheads. It's just an impossible task. And usually all there is a bunch of parked cars and nobody until the car burglary guys show up, and then all of a sudden you're interested in the trailhead. But there's not normally a lot of terrible things that happen at trailheads. It's out at the facility where things are going, or dogs or something. So, but I just don't want to see it get nixed and sit down, compromise. But I think sit down with the neighborhood again is going to be a tough one for you, and especially if you're trying to get consensus. Because I still think there's some confusion about trails and sustainability and all those things in the restroom. So I wish you good luck, and I'm there to help you champion it as you move it along if it hits a snag. Thank you.
Lori?
So I think for me, maybe some of the stuff that you could do with the residents up there is to concentrate on the few areas in which it seems to be they're a little bit, I agree with Mark, we're not going to come to consensus on the overall design, but I think they have some valid points that you could work on. I was interested when Chris was talking about what could you do on the sides of the road to prevent the cars from parking there, so that it's more than just putting a sign up. And I think those are some wonderful aspects that you have some great people on the phone today that you could get together with and say, what could I put there to eliminate your concerns? And so I think those are some areas that you should work on with them. I doubt you're going to come to consensus on the number of parking spaces, the restroom, things like that. I just see that as a divergent points of view. But I would like you to please work with them on that and maybe look at the wildlife interface, the WUI fund, to see in the grant there with the fire department if we could put the water tank in. I think those residents have very valid concerns about their fire protection, and I'd like to try and address that. Thanks.
All right, well, those are very comprehensive comments. I don't have a lot to add. What I would like to do is to thank staff for the work that they put into this. I'd like to thank the residents of the Kings Canyon area for participating in this public meeting. There will be additional public meetings for you to participate in, beginning with Monday. The Parks and Rec Commission meeting will be the next public meeting. I agree with the comments of the other commissioners that it is difficult to come to a consensus. So while residents or members of the public may have specific concerns and may have opinions about those specific concerns, it's impossible to reconcile. Well, this is actually a description that I use for my job as a supervisor. There's almost 57,000 people in Carson City, and every one of them has a different opinion on how I should do my job. And I can't reconcile 57,000 different opinions on what I should do. So I look at the data and I make the best decision I can based on the data. And I think that this will be a situation where we will need to implement that plan. We'll take a look at the data. We'll come up with a design and an implementation plan based on that data. And all the public input will be used to maybe refine those improvements, which I think we've seen tonight through the comments of the public and the staff. So that process hopefully will continue. And at the end of the day, when this project is completed, we'll have something that we can all be very proud of. Is there any final comments from anybody in the room here? Greg?
So I just want to clarify, when I said that we should have a meeting with people up there, I'm not looking for consensus. But it seems to me, by listening to the comments, that they don't think they've had their voice heard That's really what I was getting at.
Right, understood. And, you know, the public process today at this meeting, and then next week with Parks and Rec, and there will be additional public meetings after that. So I believe that there will be many opportunities for continued public input on this project. Any other staff or Lucia?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the discussion, and, you know, as I told one of the residents on the phone last week, it's not too late for public comment. Now is the time. Now is the perfect time. I think there was a little bit of a misstatement by one of the commenters a few minutes ago about a lack of public hearings before this. There was a 30% public hearing earlier in the project at both this board as well as Parks and Open Space. But regardless, I am thrilled, and I know that I speak for other staff, that we are thrilled that the community is engaging. So it's not too late. Let's continue. Please continue to call our staff, call Dirk, call Chris Martinovich, call me, and let's work these things out so that we're making infrastructure improvements that best meet both the residents' needs and the larger community's needs. So I just really appreciate the discussion and the input. It's been really fantastic. One piece of clarification on direction to staff. Coming into here this evening, staff were prepared to narrow the roadway from 28 to 26. We did receive a comment from Chaz that he was okay with leaving it at 28 for reasons as discussed in depth. I just wanted to confirm that we're good on that, to leave it at 28 from the board.
Unless I hear otherwise from any members of the commission, I believe that the consensus was to leave it at 28 feet.
Okay, I appreciate the clarification.
All right, this is a non-action item. So we will move on now to agenda item 6B. For possible action, discussion and possible action regarding cooperative agreement number PR 232-20-063 between the Carson City RTC and Nevada Department of Transportation for the North Ridge Drive reconstruction project for a total of $1,041,748. To authorize the transportation manager to execute the agreement, and to authorize the RTC chair to execute future amendments to this agreement regarding time extensions or a change in the value of the funding up to 10% of the initial funding amount. Chris, this is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this item is to execute the local public agency agreement for North Ridge Drive. This North Ridge Drive project has been presented to the board a couple of times. This is the formal execution of the agreement and formal authorization of the surface transportation block grant funds in the amount listed in the staff report. This particular agreement includes only the construction and construction management portions of the project. Additional city funds are being used to do the design, and the design components of those are being completed in-house. So I just wanted to make that clarification. I'm happy to answer any other questions related to this agreement.
Any questions from the commissioners? Chaz? No? All right. There's no questions, so I will bring this back to the commission and entertain a motion.
I'll make the motion. I move to authorize the transportation manager to execute the agreement as presented and to authorize the RTC chair to execute future amendments to the agreement regarding time extensions and changes in funding up to 10% of the initial funding amount.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
And opposed say nay. Motion passes 5-0. We're now on agenda item 6C for possible action. Discussion and possible action regarding the interlocal cooperative agreement between the Carson Area Metropolitan Planning Organization, RTC, and the Carson City Board of Supervisors. This same item was on the agenda for CAMPO prior to this meeting as agenda item 6D. So I would incorporate the comments from that agenda item at that previous meeting into the record for this agenda item, and then I will open this up, Lucia, for you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No additional comments. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions from the commissioners? Any changes from item 6D at the CAMPO meeting? Seeing none, then I will entertain a motion. Well, you can make the same motion.
I think I can do it. I move to approve the amendment as presented under the CAMPO motion to amend, let's see, we amended number 2 under the city agrees and allowed the district attorney's office to conform the changes necessary for the action.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Right,
We have multiple seconds. Any discussion?
right.
Mr. Chair,
We have the DA.
Do we have to say something different?
just for the record, there was also an edit to item number 3.
Oh, stormwater.
Regional Transportation Commission agrees.
Right, thank you.
Do we have a revised motion?
The
Friendly
motion
amendment.
incorporates the change to adding stormwater.
Do seconders
funds.
agree?
I agree. Second.
Is everybody clear on the motion as amended?
It's going to match the CAMPO.
Yes, the motion should be verbatim to the motion made for agenda item 6D for the CAMPO meeting that immediately preceded this RTC meeting.
Perfect.
Everybody clear?
Yep.
All right, any final discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any nays? Hearing none, the motion passes 5-0. We're now on agenda item 6D for possible action, discussion and possible action regarding a determination that Intermountain Slurry Seal, Inc. is the lowest responsive and responsible bidder pursuant to NRS Chapter 338 and to award contract number 193000180 2020 Long Line Program to Intermountain Slurry Seal, Inc. for a total not to exceed amount of $211,411.20 to be funded with street maintenance funds. Chris.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chris Martinovich, Transportation Traffic Engineer. This is to award, as indicated, our long line program, which is all of our long stripes, all of our edge lines, all of our center lines, all of our turn pockets throughout most of the roads in Carson City, with the exception of those under construction. So Intermountain has done this numerous times for the city, and most of this work generally happens at night when there's not traffic, so we don't have traffic driving over the fresh paint. So that's about all I want to say on this one.
Any questions from any of the commissioners? We've seen this contract multiple times over the years. All right, then I'll entertain a motion.
I move to award the contract as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed say nay. Motion passes 5-0. All right, we're moving on to agenda item 6E for possible action. Discussion and possible action regarding acceptance of available fiscal year 2020 grant funding from the Nevada Aging and Disability Services Division in the amount of $16,350 for the period July 1, 2019 through June 30, 2020, and in the amount of $96,750 for the period July 1, 2020 through June 30, 2021, and to authorize the Public Works Director to execute the required award materials. Lucia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Now we're really going to get into the meat of things. I hope you brought snacks. Kidding. Okay. As most of you know, the Nevada Department of Health and Human Services Aging and Disability Services Division awards this grant. The city uses this grant to fund our senior bus pass program, which allows our seniors age 65 plus to ride the Jack Transit system free year-round. It's a really fantastic program that's heavily and widely used, very supportive, very supported, and it represents a really good partnership between Public Works and the senior center staff. So this program is really fantastic. In fiscal year 20, we were awarded $50,000, which supported 333 annual passes for our seniors. Every year we give out more. We don't limit it to 333, we always give out more. In fiscal year 20, we've given out 442 passes. The difference in cost, if you will, to Jack is $16,350. ADSD brought it to our attention that additional funding had been made available. We suspect it's due to COVID-19 and things have changed. So RTC is able to utilize the funding for passes already distributed. I was asked whether we would be able to use this fiscal year 20 funding in advance of the fiscal year 20 ending approximately 20 days from now? The answer is yes. Immediately upon approval this evening, staff are prepared to execute the agreement with ADSD and immediately turn around a reimbursement request for that amount. Additionally, staff did receive notification that we were awarded our full grant ask for fiscal year 21. The past many years, we've requested enough funding for that 333 passes, but in recognition that we've continued to give out more and the popularity of the program has grown, we did request more this year, and we were awarded that full amount of $96,750. So that begins on July 1st. I did want to announce that this year we're distributing the passes a little bit differently. Our seniors get really excited about this program, and we do generally an annual distribution event at the senior center. Due to COVID-19, we're not doing that this year. We're doing it phone in and mail back applications. If folks, residents have questions about that or would like to sign up, give us a call at 841-RIDE, and that's our Jack dispatch line, and we'll get you all set up with those passes. In the meantime, residents that have passes from fiscal year 20, we're not going to kick anyone off the bus for a slow transition into fiscal year 21. So just bring your pass, and it's all still good. We want to take care of our passengers. So in the fiscal impact section, it does discuss local match, which is certainly accurate as presented. I do want to clarify, though, that this particular funding source considers the program's full suite of expenditures over the year. So no additional local match is required above and beyond what we use regularly for our program. With that said, happy to answer any questions and appreciate authorization for the Public Works Director to execute the required award materials. Thank you.
Any questions for Lucia? I see 4 no's. All right, then I will entertain a motion.
I move to accept the grant funding as presented and to authorize the Public Works Director to execute the required award materials.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? I would just note again for the record that the number to call if you are interested in a bus pass is 841-RIDE, R-I-D-E, 841-RIDE. All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any nays? All right. That also passes 5-0. We are now on agenda item 7, internal communications and administrative matters, non-action items, beginning with item 7A, transportation manager's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe maybe all of the board members have heard at this point, but at their June 4th meeting, the Board of Supervisors did approve a 5-cent per gallon tax on diesel sold within Carson City limits, an ordinance to be implemented starting August 1st of 2020. The ordinance is set to sunset at the end of 2022 unless it is approved by a ballot measure, a vote of the people before that time. Staff does appreciate the efforts of the board to bridge the roadway funding gap, and that recommendation to bring that to the board came through RTC, and so want to acknowledge the RTC members as well. This additional revenue is anticipated to net an additional $350,000 to $400,000 annually. Second item, staff is working feverishly to wrap up our various professional services contracts for projects budgeted under fiscal year 20. 3 of those items you can expect to receive presentations in the next 2 months. First, the Southwest Carson Circulation Study. This looked at the parallel corridors to South Carson Street and sort of the post-South Carson Street future year to make sure that any operational improvements or infrastructure enhancements to maintain and improve business access can be planned and implemented. Secondly, the 2019.
Before you move off of that
Yes, sir.
one, that report is the one where we'll use that data to determine what the pro rata improvements to be included in development agreements with developers will be. Is that correct?
That
Or
may
not
be the
exactly?
case. The focus, really the focus of the report, the draft report that staff are reviewing is, as we can expect some traffic to maybe go onto Curry or go onto Silver Sage, are there striping improvements or stop sign changes or different operational enhancements? We had a previous study that looked at a signal at Road Street where the Starbucks is, sort of right there. Is that really needed? How does that fit in South Carson? So those types of things, potentially, if there was a bigger project, we could certainly do the pro rata for that.
Okay, thank you.
The second one is the 2019 Bicycle and Pedestrian School Safety Review Studies. This, if you recall, was $149,000 in Safe Routes to School funding to look at bicycle and pedestrian improvements within 2 miles of each of the 8 elementary and middle schools in Carson City. We have a draft plan, and we have absolutely got our money's worth on this. This will serve as our active transportation plan in Carson City for decades. It's a really incredible plan, so we hope to bring that back to you next month. It will also go to the school board and the Board of Supervisors if there's interest. And then finally, the downtown parking study. This was conducted late last year. RTC funded it, and we worked very closely with Lee Plemmel and his group in community development. Lee and I will be back next month to share the results of that study and give any recommendations that came out of that. And that concludes my comments.
Any questions for Lucia? Seeing none, we'll move on to agenda item 7B, street operation activity report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Keeping this very brief, I did want to highlight one row, though I'm happy to answer any additional questions for this report, which provides a summary of the activities for April of 2020. Typically, in the spring, our crews are out there, they're doing weed abatement, they're starting work that they're not able to do during the cold weather. This year with COVID-19, things shifted a little bit, and our staff and our crewmen had some extra time, and so we're able to do some focus on areas that they don't normally necessarily get to. That shoulder work on asphalt roads is a task that it unfortunately sort of it gets by the wayside. It gets deprioritized with some of the more critical potholes and other things. So there was an incredible amount of work done on the shouldering this year, and that was something that we were really fortunate to have our crews be able to get to. So I did want to highlight that. Happy to answer any additional questions.
Any questions on the street operation activity report? I'm seeing none. We'll move on to 7C, transportation project status report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll touch on a few of these. I'll speed through some of these other ones a little bit quicker. The first one, South Carson Street. I know Dan is back here if there are specific questions on the construction, but it's progressing. Storm drain work is underway, utility work in the area of Stewart Street, and I believe the construction of the roundabout is generally scheduled to start sometime in the later part of June, early July, so we'll see that begin to occur. Moving to the next project, the freeway multi-use path to Colorado Street. Construction is underway. A&K Earth Movers is building that project, and they're working in the area of Colorado and Fairview, and they'll be building that for most of the summer.
Chris, I have a question about that, if I could interrupt. So will the linear ditch path remain open during this construction process?
I'd have to confirm with Rob Fellows, the project manager, but some of the meetings I've attended, I believe the path is to remain open. Yes, Chaz.
So, and the reason I ask is that someone I know just tried to ride the path and one of the gates was locked. So I'm hoping that they can, obviously there'll be some construction activities, tie-in and that sort of thing that might affect the linear ditch openness, but for most of the time, if it can stay open, that would certainly be preferable. So thanks.
Okay, I'll pass it on. The other multi-use path project, the path from Colorado down to the Edmond Sports Complex, we've completed the survey, and so we're working on the design of that pathway. Kings Canyon trailhead improvements, we've touched on that today. Group Street Rehabilitation Project, I know we were completing some survey and that has been completed, so design on this one is relatively slow. We want to make sure we get our other north-south projects, Carson Street, Fairview, and some of the other ones completed before we really dive into construction on this one. The other project, speaking of Fairview, the next one is the Fairview Drive Rehabilitation Project, which they're underway. SNC is constructing the water line down Fairview Drive, and once that's completed, they'll be reconstructing the pavement. The Airport Road Sewer Utility Replacement Project, this one's ongoing. They've provided and installed additional dewatering wells in the area of US 50 so that they can continue to, when they trench out, they can put their sewer line in without having it float away, so that's important. Next project is the Winnie Lane Pavement Preservation Project. We have been working with NV Energy on this one related to potentially undergrounding the overhead power lines. They've gotten back to us, and essentially the cost for doing so is quite high. So we've kind of tabled that discussion with them and pretty much tabled the project for now. due to increasing costs associated with that. The plan is to use surface transportation block grant funds at a future date to bring this project back to life and really provide a better enhanced ADA improvement and roadway project all combined into one. We're just not able to do that at this time. The next project I want to cover is the District 2 Roop Street project. So this project was awarded, this is a microseal project. It was awarded to SNC this past board meeting in May, and construction has begun on this. They've done some patching in the area of Hot Springs Road, and they'll be doing the slurry seal here, I think, in the next few weeks. Solomon Road, Russell Way pavement preservation project is also underway. SNC has been working in the area of Russell and Long Street, reconstructing those ADA ramps. And this was the project also that Joseph mentioned during the CAMPO board meeting, where we tried the fiber reinforced pavement. And so we've done a patch in front of the high school for a fiber reinforced pavement that we are going to kind of use as a test section and possibly implement on other projects in Carson City going forward. That was at no additional cost to the city. Northridge Drive pavement preservation project, 60% plans have been submitted to NDOT for their review, and we have awarded the LPA, or executing the LPA agreement tonight. Next project is a Long Street, District 2 Long Street project. I know design is underway. The scope on this project has a lot of utility components, and so there's coordination going on with those utilities in addition to the roadway. Two more projects, Telegraph Street project. I believe the design has been completed and it should be out to bid maybe this week or next week. And so we're looking to have that constructed and completed, I think, by the end of October is the target. Last project is the Robinson Area Sewer Project. This is a new project. It's primarily a sewer reconstruction project that the Regional Transportation Commission funding is being used to supplement that. It's essentially a sewer rehab project in the area of as shown on the map there, Robinson and Spear and Caroline and some of the adjacent cross streets. And so it's just, we're providing some roadway reconstruction services as part of that. I have no other projects, so I'll happy to take any questions.
Any questions on the transportation project report? Good job.
Okay, thank you.
All right, then we will move on to agenda item 8, board comments. Chaz, any final board comments?
Yeah, I would just like to give some kudos to staff for, doing a pretty thorough job on the Kings Canyon thing as well as all the other projects they have to deal with. So thank you, staff, for that. That's it.
Great, thank you, Chaz. Greg?
Ditto.
Mark?
Ditto.
That's called succinct.
No, I could. Projects that bring the neighborhoods in are very difficult, very time consuming, but well worth the time and money for the 5% we're giving them. Essentially, a pretty good deal.
Lori?
No comment.
All right. Okay, so agenda item 9, the next meeting is tentatively scheduled for Wednesday, July 8th, right here in the Sierra Room. It will begin immediately after the conclusion of the CAMPO meeting. Item 10, final public comment. Desi, do we have anybody on the line for final public comment?
Yes, we have a couple. Scott Kulo.
Scott, go ahead.
Yep, thank you all for your time this evening and for hearing our comments. I would like to mention that we do have a petition which had 5 specific request items with over 150 signatures, most of those not from Kings Canyon residents, I think. Secondly, the planner, I think Dirk mentioned the feasibility of limiting the parking spaces to 25 as a good accommodation. And only one commissioner is advocating for 30, and I'm not quite sure what the design process goes on from there. And then as a resident, I'd just like to say we're not demanding consensus. That obviously there's always compromise in situations like this. I live up here. I see the project. I see it's going to impact my neighborhood, but I'm willing, I want it to be a great experience for people as well. So I don't own the canyon, I don't own the access, and I'm all on board for that. But what we want is the chance to air our observations and concerns and have them considered more fairly. For example, one council member expressed frustration with having tow zones, citing problems with towing cars away and having to deal with angry neighbors or angry owners of the vehicles. Well, that misses the point entirely. The tow zone for us is an imminent safety issue because egress from the canyon when the next fire occurs is a life and death matter. So throwing aside the concept of tow zones in that manner, I think discounts legitimate concerns that are not always apparent because people have different experiences with towing of vehicles. So this is why I would request direction from the commission to the planners to have brainstorming sessions so that issues like this can be fully vetted and implemented. This could have been done had there been public meetings as were notified. I agree to Lucia's statement that there were 2 public meetings where comments were available, but my passive position stemmed from my initial notification, which informed me that there would be a public meeting of which I was to be notified, and that never occurred. So it's my fault if I didn't get involved in city government. I understand that now. I didn't know it then. I thought some type of notification was going to be forthcoming, as that's what the initial contact about the project said. So I do appreciate you guys hearing me out and all the work you do. I know it's not easy, but I do feel that the residents up here, as well as other of those 150 signatories, have some legitimate concerns about the project as it has been currently planned up to the 70% stage.
Thank you, Scott. And just for your information, we all have copies of the petition.
Okay.
Desi, additional public commenters?
Caller, it is your turn for final public comment. Please state your name for the record.
Hi, this is Charles Clemenson, Chick Clemenson, and again, I'd second what Scott said, and I wanted to state my appreciation for the cooperation we've had from Public Works planners. Dirk has worked hard to accommodate some of our suggestions. I thought we had progressed in some areas. I would like to see the commission direct them to continue those efforts. We don't anticipate that there is going to be an issue with full consensus or agreement with our input. However, I think that there is valuable input based on years of experience. We didn't touch much on fire safety issues. That's still for concern. The water tank is an excellent idea. We would push for that. We maybe even would try and find a source of funds someplace. I think that's a fabulous idea. But I appreciate the commission's attention and especially Public Works. I would not discount the importance of continuing to interface and obtain input and assistance from residents in the canyon and, for that matter, from other residents in the community, some of whom have expressed interest and concern in this area. Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Charles. And just to clarify for those providing public comment tonight, public comment is an opportunity for the public to provide just that, their comments uninterrupted. It is not an opportunity for discussion between the public commenter and the commission. So I just wanted to put that on the record so that you understand why we are not asking you questions. Desi, do you have any additional public commenters?
That was all for final public comment.
Thank you, Desi. Then if we have no additional public comment, then we'll move on to agenda item 11 for adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Move for adjournment.
We are so moved. Thank you all for participating.